Parashat Mishpatim is this week's parasha. Exodus chapter 21, verse 1 to the end of Exodus 24. This this chapter holds some challenges, hopefully for you. Hopefully you feel it. Hopefully you've recognized some of the tensions. We just finished the story of the liberation from Egypt. The 10 words are thundered from Mount Sinai. They begin with Anoki Adonai Elohecha, Asher Hosietecha, Me'eretz Mitzrayim, Me'ba'ith Avadim. I am Hashem, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. It's a declaration of God as a self-revelation, as an emancipatory, liberating God. But as we go into Exodus 21, we begin with the following revelation. I'm going to be doing a screen share. For Exodus 21, it begins, Wa'ele Mishpatim Asher Tasim Lefanehem. These are the judgments which you shall set before them. Highly significant here is that the first of these mishpatim, these judgments, begins with the following. It says, Ki tikne eved ivri. If you buy an eved ivri, a Hebrew slave. Many translations will translate this as servant. And I think that that's not inaccurate, but I think sometimes the intent with translating the word eved as servant versus slave is to soften the blow. The fact is that the first regulations that we receive in Exodus 21 have to do with humans being sold and treated as property. And this is just right after God revealed himself as a God who emancipates, that liberates. We have the regulation regarding the Eved Ivri, the Hebrew slave. We have the regulation that follows regarding the Eved Ka'ani, that would be the Canaanite servant, who is in this case given to the Hebrew servant as a sort of temporary wife. Then we have the regulations regarding the daughter who is sold by her father. It's understood through tradition that the sale is to better her circumstances, not just for commerce by itself, but as an opportunity to advance his daughter within that society, within those societies. And then we go into passages that follow that have to do with servants and slaves and that regulate proper treatment and under what conditions an Eved, in this case it's an Eved Ka'ani, can be liberated based on an injury. This is quite the stark contrast to the God that we just experienced in Exodus chapters 1 through 20. And this should cause everybody to pause. We know elsewhere in Tanakh, I'm looking at Psalm 19, it reads, Torath Adonai Temima. The Torah of Hashem is perfect. It goes on to say, Mishpat Adonai Emeth Zadku Yachdav. The judgments of Hashem are true and righteous altogether. How can the Torah be called perfect when it's speaking of a moral horizon or of ethical cases that are actually below, in some ways, what we're capable today of thinking of? This is a serious consideration, and it's one that should cause you pause. Many of us have been trained with the idea that there are only two ways to think of ethics. The first way is to surrender our critical thinking and say that God defines what's right and wrong, full stop. Others, on the other side of this polarity, is the idea of complete relativism, that there is no divine absolute standard of right or wrong. It's completely up to us. The biblical Hebrew vocation, the call that the Torah has for humanity to be the image of God, does not go to either extreme. And let's discuss this. First, let's look at this word mishpat. So in Exodus 21, this word mishpat, but ele ha-mishpatim asher tasim lefanehem. These are the judgments which you shall set before them. The word mishpat is best mapped onto the idea of casuistic law or case law. A case law is a situational prescription. It goes like this. If X happens, then Y should happen in response. Caustic law or case law is different than apodictic law. Apodictic law are prescriptions that apply regardless of conditions. So an example in Chumash would be Tishmeru et ha-Shabbat ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall protect the Sabbath. I am the Lord your God. You'll see that the Sabbath there is being combined with the nature of who Hashem is. Okay, it's being combined. Why? Because it's apodictic. That applies regardless of what the conditions are. Now, a mishpat is a case law ruling. I'll repeat that. A mishpat is a case law ruling. It's used not only for divine judgments, it's also used for the judgments made by a human court, by a human judge, and by a human king. Let me show you an example. This is Deuteronomy chapter 17. It's talking about the Central National Court of Appeals. And it says that when a person or a group goes up to this national court at the place that God chose to put to place his name, that they are to issue a sentence of judgment. It says, this is Deuteronomy 17:11. Al pei haTorah asher yerucha, according to the instruction that they give you. Al ha-mishpat asher yameru, and according to the judgment that they tell you, lacha, you shall do. It's very significant here that this word mishpat is being used specifically to describe the ruling of the court. Again, it says, well, all ha-mishpat, according to the mishpat, okay, that they tell you there is an incumbency to protect and to observe that. The point here being that the word mishpat is used for the decisions of human courts and human kings. A similar passage, this is Deuteronomy 25. Riv bein anashim, if there's a controversy between people, v'nigshu al ha-mishpat, and they come to a matter of mishpat, a matter of case law, a matter of there needing to be a decision. Ush fatum v'hazitchu et hazadik, v'hirishu et harasha. The judges shall judge them, they shall declare just or innocent the righteous, and they shall condemn the wicked. They're looking for a mishpat, for a judgment. They're looking for something to be rendered on their behalf. Similar passages here. This is in the book of Kings. I believe this is the story of Shlomo of Solomon, when he made the judgment between the two women and their disputed baby. Okay, and it says, and all Israel heard of the judgment. Yishma'u kol Yisrael et ha-mishpat asher shafat ha-melech. All of Israel heard the judgment, the case law, which the king gave. Okay, it's highly significant here that when a king, when an elder, when a judge issues a judgment, that what he is doing is making mishpat. So when the Torah tells us that these are the Mishpatim, this is bringing us into the ecosystem of case law. Now, what we need to step back and look at is the broader narrative picture of what's happening in Exodus. As the book of Exodus begins, we have 70 members of the family of Jacob entering into exile in Egypt. We learn later that the judgments and the plagues and the ransoming of Israel from Egypt was a deliverance specifically from the gods of Egypt. The number 70 is highly significant. Genesis 10, there are 70 root nations in the table of nations. The number 70 is representative of the entirety of the nations of the world. The number 70 comes into play again in Exodus 24 at the end of this parasha. We see it in Exodus 24 that 70 of the members of the elders of Israel, it says here, Exodus 24:9, V'ya'al Moshe v'Aharon Nadav v'Avihu v'shivim miziknei Yisrael. And Moses went up, and Aaron, and Nadav, and Avihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. 70 root nations dispersed at the Tower of Babel. 70 members of the house of Jacob go into Egypt. The entire house of Israel is redeemed and ransomed from Egypt and from the gods of Egypt. This number 70 points back as a representative number for the entirety of the nations. The nations have been sent, so to speak, into exile. They've been put under the rulership of the rogue angels, so to speak, of the nations. Jacob, Israel, as a representative of the nations, went into exile, was placed under bondage of the gods or the angels of the nations, and was brought back. When we see the 70 elders ascend the mountain in Exodus 24, we are seeing the restoration of the image of God within Israel. The name Israel means to contend, to strive, or to rule with God. The image of God is being restored through Israel, ultimately through Israel's success and victory, which will be intensified and brought to its maturity through Messiah. That is the restoration of the image of God. We learn later that the 70 elders, Numbers 11, constitute the central court of Israel's justice. This is what becomes the Sanhedrin. They later issue Mishpatim, judgments for all of Israel. What we see happening in Exodus 21 with the issuing of these Mishpatim is we are seeing the start of Israel's completion of its role as the image of God. A fundamental to the calling to be the image of God is to participate with the Creator in completing the work of creation. In Exodus 20, we are given the Sabbath commandment as the fourth commandment. Of significance, when the Sabbath commandment is given, it identifies 7 benefactors of the commandment. Okay, it reads here, you shall not do any work. It says, Lo ta'asa kol malacha ata you, Vincha, your son, number 2, Betecha, your daughter, Avdecha, your servant, Wamatecha, your maidservant, Uvemtecha, your animal, Wakarecha, the foreigner, or the stranger in your midst. That's 7. You'll note here that liberation is being given also to the household servants and slaves. When we look back at the Sabbath and creation, which is what the commandment does, in the very next verse it says, Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashemayim et haaretz. For in 6 days Hashem made the heavens and the earth. We've learned elsewhere that the idea of the 7 days maps onto the idea of the building of a tabernacle within this world. In Genesis 1, we discover the world beginning in a state of chaos, tohu vavohu. Each of the days of creation is setting limits and boundaries on the chaos. Humanity is appointed on day 6 to be the image of God, and the Sabbath day is given as a calling for what the image of God is here for. The image of God is here to make the world a habitation for God. Okay, that's the whole purpose of the image of God. And so when we see in Exodus 24 the ascent of the elders, that's walking into the beauty and the calling and the vocation of the Shabbat. In the Shabbat commandment, as we just saw, there is this idea of the liberation of the Eved, of the servant, of the slave. We see that also in the idea of the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and the idea of the Yovel, the Jubilee year. And elsewhere throughout Torah, this is built into the structure of the text. This is reminding us as we read Exodus 21 that we are living in a world that still needs repair. There are still slaves in the world. There are still servants in the world. That's not the objective that Hashem has ever had. Hashem is calling us to view these mishpatim as templates. They are templates. They are paradigmatic. By paradigms, that means they are patterns that we are to duplicate. In order to ascend into the role of the image of God, we are to continue to adjudicate justice in this world as partners with Hashem, with the God of Israel. We are to learn Torah. We are to be transformed by the practice and the learning and the practice of the Torah, and to become the kind of people who are able to make mishpat and judgment in this world. So this said, when we look at Exodus 21 and the Mishpatim, this is not telling us that we need to have a world in which there is slavery. Exodus 20, with the Sabbath, already pointed us to a world in which there is no slavery. Exodus 21 is not telling us that slavery is the ultimate good. It's showing us how to establish justice within the world and within the limitations of what exists. But the ascent, the elevation, is to become part and participants in the formation of justice in this world. And so when we come across these mishpatim, these judgments in this week's Torah reading, we don't have to justify them. Well, we don't have to just justify them. That is, we can look at them in their context. We can understand them as being advancements on justice in their time. But we don't have to somehow explain why they are the best ideal. We don't have to explain why we need to bring these back into our world. They are templates for us to launch and to create mishpatim in our own societies, okay, within our own community of Israel. Okay, so I'm going to end here. Please, if you would like to share any thoughts, any objections, this is a unique way of understanding this week's Parashah. Have a fantastic Shabbat.